Hello, this is Tom Brevoort. You are listening to Into the Night, the Moon Knight podcast.
Yes, welcome back, Looney listeners. You are listening to Into the Night, the Moon Knight podcast. This is episode 196, and you are with your High Priest of Khonshu Rey. Hello. And we will be talking about a LUNAR-PICK Modern Run review thanks to a waxing crescent in the sky. I am joined by a very special guest from earlier on in the week as well. He's a critic, he's a Marvel.com writer, he's a social media manager for The Spool, Tim Stevens. Tim, welcome back.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be back.
Excellent.
Sounds like I just left you.
Yeah, had a long way to come to make this second episode. And Tim and I, we are reconvening to discuss Shadowland Moon Knight from 2010. Gregg Hurwitz, very cool run. It's only a 3-issue run, but we'll look at issue 1. As always, as well, a big thank you to our patroonies, so our co-producers and executive producers on each of the shows. You too can become a Patreon member as well if you check out our Patreon page. So a big thanks to Daniel, Justin, Derek, Wayne, Jordan, Josh, James, Russell, and Anthony for all your contribution. But thank you everyone for just listening. It's just fun to interact with everyone, talk about Mooney. A big thanks to our sponsors, Fringe Knight by Daniel Doing, an original indie comic based on Erie, Pennsylvania's very own mysterious superhero. A big thanks to Hello Headphones, empowering gamers to play at their best. And of course, Dreamland Comics, the superhero superstore. Tim, are you... my geography in US is not very good. You're on the East Coast, right? So a bit far from Dreamland. Yeah, a bit far to go to Illinois.
Yeah, okay. It's a little bit of a drive. Maybe I'll make it out there. My editor-in-chief over at The Spool is in Chicago, so maybe I'll get the excuse to kill two birds with one stone. But it's probably not going to be tomorrow.
Excellent. Well, you can just use the code and you'll get some discounts there. Anyway, Loonies, as mentioned, we are doing a LUNAR-PICK Modern Run review, so we're going to crack straight into it. So as mentioned, this is Shadowland Moon Knight Volume 1, Issue 1. It was released August 2010. We have writer Gregg Hurwitz, penciler Bong Dazo, I love that name, inker Jose Pimentel, colorist Matt Milla, and Chris Sotomayor. Letterer Joe Caramagna, and editor Axel Alonso. Now, also as well, it's available in a floppy format. You can still buy the single issue of it. It's available digitally and on Marvel Unlimited. And I'm reading it from the trade version as well. So they did collect 1 to 3 of Shadowland Moon Knight. Plus, I think you get a Volume 1 Moon Knight with Daredevil in it, just because Daredevil and Moon Knight are in it. So that's pretty cool. As always, listeners, for our modern run LUNAR-PICK review, what happens is we will go through a bare bones. It's basically a summary of the issue, so you kind of get a gist of what it's about if you want a bit of a recap. And then Tim and I will go through our comments, aspects from writing, art, themes, characterizations, references, and we'll cap it off with a moon rating. Tim, can I ask, will you be picking from the vanilla rating system, or we do have Khonshu's rating system, which is it's got a little bit more verve to it?
I think win in Rome, so I will embrace Khonshu's rating system.
Okay. Khonshu's, actually. Khonshu's, he was one of the OG co-hosts on the show, so he came up with that system. Very good indeed. Now, Tim, I haven't discussed this with you, but would you be so kind as to read out the bare bones? This is courtesy of Marvel.com.
Daredevil, the former defender of Hell's Kitchen turned leader of the ninja death cult known as the Hand, has summoned the villainous Profile to take Moon Knight out of the picture for good. And to do it, the Profile enlists the aid of a mysterious figure, a second avatar of Khonshu. Has Khonshu finally decided to replace Moon Knight? And if so, what hope does Moon Knight have of saving Daredevil and himself from the darkness of the Shadowland?
Fantastic. There you go, Looney listeners. Just a brief summary of what this issue was all about. I think it's fair to say, Tim, the 3 issues as a whole really were, that completed the whole piece, the whole story. But issue 1, there was plenty here. So actually, just to open up, overall, what did you think of this issue?
There's a ton that happens in this issue. For a single issue, there is a lot of movement that goes on into this issue. It's a mixed bag for me. By and large, I really like the issue. I like the art. I like that it takes Moon Knight in a place where he's actually upbeat and optimistic about his future, which is very rare. There's some stuff that happens later in the issue that I'm not a huge fan of, that feels a little tacked on. But by and large, I really like it. And as a setup for the confrontation to come between Moon Knight and Daredevil, I think it's pretty intriguing.
Yeah. I think it's a good setup issue for it, and as you say, there's a load of stuff that happens in here. Now, interestingly enough, when I first read Shadowland in general, to be honest, I wasn't impressed at all. I wasn't too happy with it. I liked the art. I thought the art was great. I mean, the art just really pops for me. But the story was just like a little bit just too against the grain for me with a lot of stuff, and we'll get into it. So yeah, I had a lot of issues there, but reading it again recently, just over the last couple of days, I've read all 3 of them again, and I'm actually taking and leaning towards it. I mean, I didn't think I would. Yeah. And so I want to actually read the rest of Shadowland just to get the holistic view of the whole thing. But yeah, I didn't find it as tedious this time. I actually, dare I say, enjoyed it. Yeah. So I guess, as you mentioned, let's kick off. Things are going well for Moon Knight. So it opens up with Moon Knight pretty much upbeat, and like he literally calls it out as it's, what does he say? It says, there's a beautiful splash page here. Everything has been coming up roses. So it's not often you hear Moon Knight say something like that. But yeah, I thought this was a nice departure from your typical, I don't know, of late Moon Knight being a little bit down in the dumps, a bit lowly. But we also get Jake in control here as well. So Mark Spector's gone, which is a big thing by the time we get to issue 3, of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that got played up in maybe in Vengeance of Moon Knight as well, which is the series that just preceded this, of Jake being sort of the main personality that Moon Knight's operating underneath. But it's interesting to see here because I don't remember them interacting a lot with Marlene, and so we tend to think of Marlene specifically with Mark Spector. So it's sort of intriguing, the idea that it doesn't matter who his quote-unquote face is. She's in love with the man, not necessarily whatever he is at that moment, be it Jake or Steven or Mark.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point that she does. Does she say it here? Yeah, I mean, they even joke about it later on in the issue where a little bit of a cruel joke. She pretends to fall off the edge of the building, just to have a dinner with Mark or Jake. But she makes a mention here. It's too much fun getting to have all of you. It's like having an affair every day. So I think she's taking it in her stride. I mean, she really did prefer. Actually, I'd even say, Tim, she preferred Stephen Grant in the earlier Mensch run. She would always address him as Steve or Steven. So it's interesting to see her interact with Jake. But it seems like she's taking everyone, like him as a whole now, which is interesting. And of course, one of the big things here, Tim, is the announcement that Marlene is pregnant as well.
This is one of the things I don't love.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Just because essentially what happens is it's announced in this issue, she tells her she's pregnant, and by the end of the issue, if you read ahead, if you read the second and third issue, that pregnancy is over. So it's on the one hand, there's a lot of stuff that happens, and that's to the book's credit, especially for a limited series. On the other hand, this is a pretty big development in both of their lives, and it is treated very much as purely for plot purposes. So that's kind of a bummer.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, it's just it is such a big thing, but then just to actually further it and just to have it as a driver for Moon Knight to really go after Shadow Knight later on. Yeah, a little bit. It was a shock. I remember. I mean, this is a big thing, you know. And so interesting. Like later on, we see in the Bemis run that Dietrich, we do actually get even more interesting what Bemis does, and I wonder if they will. I wonder if we will see Dietrich later on, Tim. I don't know. A lot of people reckon that she might be shelved. But interesting idea anyway. Interesting that I think Marlene had an affair with Jake behind Steven's back to have Dietrich. So that's and Mark, which is a very, very strange kind of premise, but I kind of dig it. Because it's the same guy. So very interesting indeed. Also as well, so what we get the profile. He makes a return here, and I'm just going to jump down to our references to other runs. Of course, he was first seen in the Houston run. A very interesting character. How do you take him as villains go?
I mean, as a therapist, I find him interesting, because this whole thing it's all about the psychology of it. On the other hand, I mean, there's tons of, sort of evil psychology characters, so that's a little bit too bad. But I appreciate that the way he works a problem isn't purely through physical force. It's always interesting when characters are like that in superhero comics. And I like that he, in some ways, is a mirror of who Mark once was, in that he's purely for hire. He's started to take things personally because of how bad Mark beat him last time. But in general, he's just in it for the money. He has no particular morals. He could as easily be a good guy next week if somebody's got the cash on the barrel for him. So I like those kinds of characters. In some ways, that's like obviously a far more flamboyant version is Taskmaster, who has worked predominantly with villains, but also has worked with the good guys, because whoever has the cash is where Taskmaster's going. So I always like that aspect of they're bad, but they're mostly bad because they don't care about anything, not because they're actually motivated by evil.
Yeah. I think it's interesting as well that I found it very cool to see him share some space with Daredevil as well. Being predominantly a Moon Knight villain, and I'm a Daredevil fan as well. Just to see those two come together, I was like, oh, cool, because he'd pretty much been in his own sandbox in the Moon Knight kind of corner. So that was quite interesting as well. And he's looking for, I guess, a new avatar of vengeance. So this is weird. It's come about really weird because Daredevil wants Moon Knight for, and again, I apologize because I did read all of them, so I apologize if I do bleed over to issue 2 and stuff. But it's revealed that there's something here that is that. Hang on, am I getting that right? There's a sapphire crescent that is the weapon that will undo the beast, right? That is possessing Daredevil.
That doesn't show up in this issue, but that happens in the arc,
but Daredevil wants Moon Knight because of his association with the Crescent, I'm assuming.
Right.
Yeah.
He's looking to take out possible dangers to his rule before it becomes an issue, is essentially what he's doing.
Yeah. So, I mean, I found it interesting. Well, it's an interesting take from the profile then to the way he goes about it to draw Moon Knight out. Is he goes to what we find out. He actually is not revealed as him yet, but he's this guy, and he kind of proposes to him that you can serve Khonshu. So to draw Moon Knight out, I guess the profile knows about Moon Knight and Khonshu and knows about how to best get to him. But his proposal to get someone else to basically serve Khonshu and to basically start spilling blood in the name of Khonshu is going to draw Mark out, which, I think it's quite an interesting way to go about it. It seemed to me
it's
very...
an interesting
very,
play on...
Yeah. Sorry. Oh, no, I was about to say it's a very...
Yeah,
sorry.
You go ahead.
I was about to say it's a very precise way of trying to draw Moon Knight out. Right. There could be plenty of other easier ways, I would have thought, but I guess it goes into the whole eventually getting the Sapphire Crescent. I mean, that then makes sense.
And with the profile, the last time he encountered Moon Knight, he went sort of right at him, for lack of a better way to put it, and ended up swallowing a few teeth for his trouble. So this is a very fitting with the character. He's always looking at the angles, and the first time he got beaten pretty badly, mentally and physically. So it makes sense that he is now looking for sort of the most indirect route to getting to Mark, and that's going through this character. Is a way to, this is somebody who's both a physical threat for Mark, so the profile doesn't have to worry about getting punched again, but also, a very effective way of forcing some of Mark's feelings to the surface that might make him sloppy or more likely to trip up.
Yeah. So it's a very, very cunning way to do it. I liked it. I mean, I kind of went with it. A couple of questions as to, why do it that way. But, I can see it. It's a bit more of an intimate kind of thing. An intimate way also to get to Moon Knight.
I thought of it like, I don't know if you're familiar with this character from DC, but there's a character called Major Disaster, and his whole thing is he can do like a very small thing and set off sort of a Rube Goldberg kind of sequence of events that results in his, a massive event. Wow. So I thought of it that way too, except psychologically that, the profile is, he's looking to get to N, but rather than just go from A to N, he's going to go through all these steps along the way to protect himself. And also, it's just, he does the one small thing and sets off this sequence of events. That's sort of how I always view it.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And I think that's very in keeping with the profile, because he's such a, he's not a physical guy, but he really does, you've seen him in the Houston run, he figures things out, he knows how to get to people in that sort of way. I just want to jump also now to, apart from the happenings of the profile and Jake and all that, we do get a nice little throwback to the origins of Mark Spector as well. I like these sepia kind of flashbacks. They're really cool. So you do see Mark and Randall, and look, hey, again, I guess no spoilers, right? This is like 10 years old. So the guy, the profile does kind of propose to become the Avatar. It is Randall, but in issue 1, you don't know that actually yet. It's not really spelled out yet.
Right. It's a neat trick, because what is actually happening is you're getting flashbacks of Randall's past.
Yes.
But because his past mirrors Mark so closely, you don't actually realize that what you're watching is Randall's life unfold, and that being leveraged by the profile. What it seems like is the profile's off finding and recruiting this guy, and also, by the way, here's Mark's history. It's only in issue 2 that you start to realize, like, oh no, all that was about the guy that the profile is speaking to. That's Randall. So it's intriguing that, you get all these flashbacks that in some ways feel like, I know who Moon Knight is. I get this. Yeah. But in issue 2, it really comes together. It's like, oh, actually, you weren't watching Moon Knight's history. You're watching Hatchet Man's Shadow Knight's past.
Yeah, which is, and it's a very interesting, I mean, I guess we'll bounce to it now. One of the new bigger things in one of the history, the retelling of him as a Marine. He has like a family as well, but doesn't totally engage with them. I guess there's some problems there. Maybe from the line of work that he's done, but it's down to maybe it's all those uranium tipped shells. And he gets these like superpowers. So it's never really explained. But what did you make? This was a big thing for me when I first read it. What did you make of this, like for Randall?
I'm not sure what we get exactly. I mean, what happens is, so he develops these superpowers, and he does so at a time where it ends up injuring very badly a nurse who's working on him in the field hospital, and therefore he is dishonorably discharged because they think he assaulted the nurse, and from there his life sort of unfurls in a negative way. He ends up in this relationship that he's unhappy with because he's so unhappy with himself, and so on. And he ends up looking like a mummy by the end of the issue.
Yeah.
But I don't know why or what we get from him, from it happening like that. as opposed to, I don't know, him accidentally hurting the nurse or him having a PTSD flashback and attacking the nurse. Why it has to be he has eye beams all of a sudden. I don't know. How did you feel about the fact, because for the most part, everything else about the character, you don't need him to have that kind of power for the rest, not even this issue, but for the next two either. I don't really, I don't know.
I'm totally with you. I found it really odd. And it's a little less so, on the rereads because you're not as shocked by what the hell is going on here. So, I just assume that this is a retcon of Randall, and for some reason, he's given this. But you're right. There's no reason why he should have them other than him to be able to kill people a lot more easily, in the later issues. I mean, he cuts a path through, was it New Orleans? They go to a Mardi Gras, and anyway, that's a bit later on. But it's so funny. You mentioned he's discharged for injuring a nurse. I've got a shout out here from Bong Dazo, the artist. When he does zap her in that panel, like, he fries her skin off. I mean, it's like, it's not like just assaulted her. I think he melted her. But anyway, that's kind of overlooked.
It's an interesting bit of unreliable narrator, because the text says, like, you broke her ribs is what Profile says to him. Yep. But it's very clear that he almost obliterated her. So it's an intriguing thing, like, is it one of those things that happens sometimes where the art doesn't match the words? Or I think more likely, the Profile is smart enough to soft pedal that again to, like, no, you're a good guy. It was an accident. These things happen, as opposed to saying, like, yeah, you just wiped her off the face of the planet. Which is kind of harder to rationalize as an accident.
That's true. And I guess you wouldn't want to tick him off as well. I mean, the guy's got a gun. Like, we get introduced to him with a gun in his mouth. So pretty shocking images to get introduced to this guy. So also these flashbacks as well. So we see, again, interesting that you mentioned, Tim, about the narrative and, who these flashbacks kind of belong to. We see Mark very much warlike, and that's kind of consistent with the history of Mark Spector. I mean, that is the division that is created between himself and his father. But we see a bit more of an interaction here with Randall. So they do, he's kind of seen here as not really wanting to play these war games, but Mark kind of, just coerces him into it. So we get a bit of a life here. Eventually this will, again, jumping a little bit, eventually this will be a big crux, I guess, between Mark and his dad. His dad blames Mark for influencing Randall to take that kind of lifestyle as well, and that causes the division between them all. But yeah, I really like these. I did like these flashbacks. Again, we're talking about the art. I enjoy these. There's a scene here as well in high school where it is Mark, right? I mean, so you mentioned that this was actually Randall's telling, but this is Mark,
right?
Yeah. He beats up
that bit is Mark. Yeah.
He beats up these three bullies. Beats them up good. I mean, saying as well,
right?
But he shows more and more kind of distance between him and his family, and 18th birthday, wants to join the Marines, that sort of thing. I just really love the art here. Speaking of which as well, what are your thoughts, Tim, on it's actually a new kind of look for Khonshu, one that you see, because I'm just backtracking, Vengeance of the Moon Knight did have actually a bird as well, didn't it?
The bird, yeah. Although the bird evolves. So this is sort of step 2, and then we get to Ellis's interpretation and a few others where he becomes sort of the bone bird.
Yeah.
To the point that even, I think, is it Bemis's run or is it Ellis's run where he dons the bone?
Ellis's. Yeah.
Yeah. And that comes up in Lemire's run as well. It's one of the sort of interpretations of Moon Knight that's bouncing around in his head. So it's interesting from that aspect that this is he continues to get increasingly bird-like over the next 10 years or so. From Vengeance forward, you get this different look for Khonshu. Because if from last episode we did Kavanaugh's run, and Khonshu is very much the classic statue who
Yes.
looks kind of like Moon Knight interpretation at that point.
Yep.
And then you have when the revamp happens, he talks more. You know, he almost never talks in the original run.
Yeah.
He looks like Bushman for a while and things like that. But yeah, they start to settle into this bird interpretation as opposed to the more human figure that we're used to.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I think he looks pretty cool. Again, I think it suits the artist as well. I think he's pulled it off. I'm just trying to think of other artists that it may not have given that level of, I guess, intimidating nature.
Yeah, and it fits with Egyptian lore too, where their gods often were depicted with animal heads on human bodies. So, you know, it fits with that. Yeah,
it's quite good as well. And so here, Khonshu, I guess the main thing from this issue as well is that Khonshu is really kind of drilling home to Mark. You know, he says he's spilling blood in my name. You know, this is what you're meant to do, Mark. And so this is actually raising that question, and it will come into effect later on because we see this guy / Randall taking on Shadow Knight, the moniker of Shadow Knight, and actually doing Khonshu's will. And Khonshu's actually going, look, you know, this guy's actually doing what I'd asked you. But again, he then strikes a deal with Mark. You know, you can still be the avatar or whatever if you end up like killing this bloke. So again, all of that formulates with the drama of then Mark discovering that it is Randall a bit later on. But no, I like the use of Khonshu here. I liked the interaction between him and Mark. It's a little bit more direct, whereas like we saw in Vengeance of the Moon Knight and stuff, and it was kind of like literally he was like a voice, like a little devil on the shoulder. Here his presence is a lot bigger. He's really just like he gets Mark down on his knees basically, and he turns him into a bit of a quivering mess. So I liked how powerful Khonshu was shown in this,
and it really speaks to Khonshu sees Mark as a tool. You know, he's not a benevolent god. He's not psyched at like, oh, great, you're having a great time, you're happy, I'm so glad for you. He has no interest in that. In fact, he wants Mark miserable. You know, he wants him angry and dangerous. He doesn't really care for a Mark that goes into the field and makes, you know, jokes about musicals and that sort of thing. You know, he wants him hyper violent. He wants him cruel.
Yeah.
He could care less about his personal life.
Yeah, I get the feeling as well, Tim, like, again, I've just got to go back to the Age of Khonshu and how Jason Aaron depicted Khonshu in that, like, a lot more powerful, I think. You know, he bestowed this power on Mark Spector. This Khonshu in Shadowland and around it, say, like Vengeance of the Moon Knight, it's a sense of almost as he's kind of like maybe the dregs of the deities. He seems very kind of like, I'll take the scraps, and not to say that Mark is the scraps, but he seems to be kind of like a bit of a bottom feeder in the level of deities here, because we don't see much, I guess, power from him. He's just pretty much an influencer. But yeah. Well,
and even the bird version of him, it seems sort of like the feathers are a mess. There seems to be gaps where the feathers should be. You know, so he seems kind of bedraggled.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me ask you a question. You know, how do you like your Khonshu? Do you like your Khonshu as silent? Do you like him as sort of a mocking presence? Do you like this version that's sort of blatantly like, you know, murder in my name? You know, what's your preference?
Yeah, it's a hard one. It is good because they are very good. I must say that I do like this this more assertive Moon Knight. Khonshu, who really will be getting into the face of Mark, because you kind of get then that dynamic between him and Mark. I mean, when he's kind of like the Bushman visage in Houston, and he's great in it. I mean, don't get me wrong, but he's more like a conscience to Mark, which is good, has its own merits as well. But I kind of like, because you know, I love this idea of the deities and stuff, and I love this interaction that he has in saying that, you know, there are dire consequences if you do not. So, like, look, I've got this thing on you. I resurrected you. You know, you owe me big. It's like a devil thing. You know, you owe me big. So you need to pay your due. I don't know. I kind of like that. Now, how about you? Do you like the it being in Mark's head sort of thing, or do you like more of the real thing?
I think it's sort of a cop-out, I guess, but I think I sort of like a mix. I like the idea of him being unpredictable.
Yeah.
That he is sort of... He's pushing Mark, not necessarily in the direction Mark needs to go, but in the direction he feels like Mark needs to go at any given moment. So sometimes, he's a conscience. Sometimes he's silent.
Yeah.
Sometimes he is just nasty and unpleasant. And if you do it that way, I think there's room for him also to have a side which is comforting or benevolent that we generally haven't seen. Mm-hmm. But I just like the idea of unpredictability in that kind of character where, 1 minute he might be just taking Mark apart and absolutely belittling him, and the next, he is a source of strength for Mark. Yeah. Just it fits with, especially, I don't know, growing up with Old Testament God and and the concept of, I'm not as familiar with the Egyptian hierarchy, but your Norse, your Greek, your Roman gods are very much human in that they are prone to jealousy, and they can be sources of great strength for people, but also sometimes they just destroy villages because they wanted to have sex with a woman and she didn't want to have sex with them. So I don't know how close Egyptian gods hew to that, but that's the sort of thing I don't know, for lack of a better way, I enjoy that sort of capriciousness of these super powerful beings who are yet still bound by their very human emotions. Yeah,
I see that. When you say that, the first kind of god I think is Zeus, in that sense. Right,
exactly,
Just on a whim decides to do something because it's just how he feels like it. And how then do you feel with Khonshu? Do you prefer him as, it might be, adding on to what you were just saying as well, do you prefer him as being ambiguous and you're saying him being random, as opposed to, say, now, in the Jason Aaron run, he's kind of a given. There was that ambiguity whether or not Khonshu really existed for Mark or not.
I like that. I like the ambiguity because I think, I don't want to get into anyone's religion, but I think anybody who, historically hears God, there's an ambiguity there. That, how would you ever prove that you've heard God or not? If you're more science-based, obviously you're inclined to say no, and maybe you're experiencing schizophrenia or whatever the case might be. If you're a person of faith, maybe you're more inclined to believe that. But especially after you get past, biblical times, you get into, I don't know, like Joan of Arc, for instance. Mm-hmm. Joan of Arc insisted she heard God, and we have absolutely no way of proving that one way or another. But it's a huge part of her. And so I like that with Moon Knight as well, that, he is having conversations that he easily could be having with just himself, or this could be, a real presence in his life. And that fits with the sort of, like you said, the randomness, the up and down. Sometimes he is just a voice in his head, and sometimes he seems to be a big hulking bird that's perched on the car, the hood of his car, yelling at him. It really depends.
I tend to kind of agree in that sense. I think there's something really nice to explore with that. But granted as well, it's hard to do that in a Marvel universe where gods walk among you. You know what I mean?
Right.
And the fact that ambiguous, but hang on, we've got the god of thunder here. There's Zeus up there on the mountaintop. Mm-hmm. This guy claims he's talking to Khonshu. It's not that far a stretch to think that there are Egyptian deities, influencing people. So, right. But I certainly do love that. That kind of.
Although, if you think about it in those terms, in some ways that makes it even harder, right? Because you're a human being who knows Thor hangs out with the Avengers, and now this guy's saying a god talks to him. It's a lot easier to dismiss in our world where, we have no evidence beyond faith of an existence of God or a god. Whereas in this world, there are gods, and it's pretty clear they exist. People come back from the dead all the time, and such up. So it's that much harder to dismiss somebody who says he speaks to a god, because you're like, well, it's possible, I guess, because I did see Thor do an interview last night.
That is true, actually. For sure, and absolutely. The only difference, I guess, the difference with Mark Spector is that he doesn't portray any or display any sort of godlike abilities, unless later on we see it. But absolutely, and again, I like how it's tied in with his potential mental issues as well, which he certainly has. It's not like, he's making that up as well. So, very, very cool stuff. Indeed. Going back to some of the other aspects of the plot as well. So we've got, this feeds more into the main Shadowland stuff, but we see an interaction between Jake and Steve Rogers of the Secret Avengers, asking Jake to infiltrate Daredevil's, what is it? Is it Shadowland? His Citadel? Or
Shadowland, yeah.
Exactly. Shadowland. So that's interesting. I like that idea, and it's a good way of getting Mark right into the middle, or Jake into the middle of it all. Daredevil he didn't even need to hire the profile. Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, again, writing wise, I thought this was cool just to parallel it. But I'm not too sure what you think of this brutal beating then of Marlene. I mean, your thoughts already on the pregnancy. This one to further drive home. Yeah. Do you have problems with this?
I mean, it fits with Randall's history, because when he shows up in the Kavanaugh run, one of the first things he does is attack Marlene. So it's sort of his move in that way. However, when that was written, it was 1990-ish, and it's now 2010 when this is written, and we're looking at it in 2021. The more we see these depictions of heroes, significant others, especially women, being attacked by villains as a means to get at them, the more, it's harder to swallow. You wish there was a way they could have made him, frighten her, or, show up at the house to make it clear he's back in a way that does involve her, that doesn't necessarily involve just a brutal beating. I think part of what makes it tough, too, besides the pregnancy, is in the Kavanaugh run, she's shown as a physical force. Like, she doesn't beat him. She doesn't. Yeah. She's not victorious over him, but she fights back. This one, it's just, he really just, destroys her. Yeah. And there's little indication that she was ever in a position to, push back or defend herself. Yeah. So there's a sort of helplessness there that's kind of icky for me.
It is, yeah. It is pretty much. And, she's, for want of it, she's not like, she's totally caught unawares. That's how I kind of take it. As opposed to the Kavanaugh run, she was already in her kind of street gear. She already had she was ready for battle. Yeah, this, she's getting ready to go to bed or something. She's in the most vulnerable position. You can come. She's in her pajamas. And the way it was depicted was very brutal. This run doesn't hold back on any of the violence as well. Again, it's a big difference. Only 10 years ago, not much really censored here. But she gets really brutally beaten, and of course, this is the impetus. As it was written for Mark to track down Shadow Knight. But I shared the same feelings. I thought it was really hard to kind of really hard to kind of read, and that same kind of thing, reading it now going, gosh, this is yet another kind of way again that she's used just to further the plot, and let's make it worse by having her pregnant as well. I mean,
exactly.
So pretty hard there, but Shadow Knight is certainly a brute. I mean, that's not the only one. I mean, earlier on as well, he kind of lays waste to, again,
an alley full of women, unfortunately.
Oh, my God.
I mean, they're sex workers that he encounters, and in some ways that's even more disheartening, because he has no connection to them whatsoever, and it just seems like murder for murder's sake.
Absolutely.
At least you can rationalize the Marlene one as well. He's trying to get at his brother, but this one is just...
Oh, well, this one, he wants to draw out Moon Knight, right? So he writes on the wall, and particular again, she's not just assaulted, her face is... It's like liquefied.
I was going to say they're like melted in the alleyway. It's rough.
It's quite rough. But so plenty things happening here. Just going through notes. Any final things? Look, I've only got just some other small notes, references again to other runs. I loved, if anything, the reference to the underwater entrance to Mark's bedroom again. It's such a cheesy thing from the Mensch run where he dives from the helicopter into the swimming pool. There's an underwater tunnel that goes up to his jacuzzi in his bedroom.
Yes.
And more often than not, Marlene is there just on the bed. And we kind of get that again here. But I don't know, it just looked a little less so. I guess because you just see him go into the pool and it just pops out. I don't know.
Right,
Yeah. But beautiful art. I mean, I love this uniform as well of Moon Knight. It's a lot more different, a lot more streetwise, armored, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And speaking of the art, I really like the cover. It's the same person who was doing covers at the end of Vengeance and Moon Knight.
Yes. Let me see. Here we go.
Francesco Mattina, is that right?
Wow. Yeah. Oh, yes. Francesco Mattina. Some beautiful...
Yeah, I really like it. And if you've read the other Shadowland books, it picks up on a theme. So all the first issues of limited series are the heroes in the foreground and Daredevil sort of over them in the background. So that continues this theme, but I think it's by far the most evocative, and it really, for me, it really works. It really calls to mind, sort of just as a single image, it speaks a lot to what's coming and the danger of Daredevil. There's one that's, I think it's, I can't remember the name of the limited series, but it involved Iron Fist and Power Man and Luke Cage, rather. Right. And that art is very sort of flat and it's drawn well, but it just doesn't have the same evocative quality that one does. This one seems like dangerous, that there is something very dark about to happen. So I really appreciate that. And
it makes Moon Knight just look totally kick-ass as
well.
He
looks great. It's awesome.
Very good in it as well. Well, I guess unless there are any other final thoughts, Tim, on the issue that you want to cover, we can give this a rating.
All right. Lead the way.
Okay, well, I usually ask the guests first here. I've got one in mind. Look, as I'm going to punch it in.
Well, how about you run down the rating system then, since we're doing the special ratings?
Okay, actually, for sure. Actually, you know what? I don't think I've ever done that before. I've just taken for granted everyone knows it, but they don't unless you actually have the prompt sheet as well. So, Looney listeners, we're going to do the Khonshu's rating system. As mentioned, it patented pending from Khonshu himself. 1 to 10. So ranging from 10 being the best, 1 being the worst one. What the fuck, the clouds are in the way. We haven't had one of them yet, so I'm pretty glad with that. All the way up to 10, the big fuck off moon. No discussions with that one. And Crumb, so going to 2, Crumb of a Moon, DreamWorks logo moon, Telephone Moon, Half the Moon, which is right in the middle, 5, Getting Small Moon, I don't know, Khonshu, what you're smoking there, Solid Round Boy, Big Beautiful Yellow Man, and the Full Moon for number 9, and as mentioned, 10, the Big Fuck Off Moon. So Tim, what would you give this Shadowland Moon Knight issue 1 of 3?
I think I am leaning towards 6, Getting Small Moon.
Okay.
There's a lot I really like about it. The stuff with Marlene does undercut it a bit, unfortunately. And if I hadn't read 2 and 3, there's some unanswered questions that I think are a little too unanswered for a first issue, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yep.
As a Moon Knight fan, it's easy to pick out that it's Randall, but if somebody, every comic somebody's first, if somebody was diving into this for the first time or their first introduction to Moon Knight, I'm not sure it reads as clear, So that I put it about a 6.
Okay. Look, I'd agree with you with that point as well, because I was just thinking of how I felt, trying to, filter out what I know of Moon Knight and how I felt when I first read this. And I do remember being a little confused whether Shadow Knight, it's like, is he meant to be Randall Spector? But I was just with his eye beams and stuff, it was playing against what I thought. like, so a bit of me was thinking, that's Randall, right? But then I was like, it can't be. That's not his history. So I remember being totally confused. So I think that kind of does play into it. I give it a little bit more. I give it a 6.5. So between the getting small moon and a solid round boy. As I read this from the, just more recently, I think before I would have given this like a 4.5 or a 5 out of 10. But I have appreciated it a lot more. Now, the art is great, but yeah, I mean, there are some things that are just, I don't know, maybe they're intentionally squeamish, make you squeamish, sorry. And yeah, I don't know. It's a good setup. You definitely need 2 and 3 to read it to get a fuller understanding. But as far as, I guess, a tie-in book goes, this is pretty good in the fact that it's not beholden too much on the main story. You know what I mean? Where you do, like, there are some tie-in books where you read it and you go, oh God, I have no idea what's happening. I've got to have read the core books. This kind of stands alone, in the sense in that it's very absolutely Moon Knight centric. And I think that's, something's got to be said for that. So a good 6.5, out of 10 there. So there you go, Loonies. Tim and I having a look at their Shadowland. Tim, I'd love, I'm not sure down the track if we can do 2 and 3. This certainly, has piqued my interest in re-looking at Shadowland. I don't know about yourself.
Sure. I'd be game for it, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, cool. No, well, there you go. Absolutely, it'd be a lot of fun to do. Let's take a quick break. We do have some feedback. So when we return, Looney listeners, Tim and I will go through some feedback that we received on social media. Catch you then.
Hello, I'm Anthony.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
And we're hosts of Capes on the Couch, the podcast where comics get counseling.
Superheroes don't always get to go home happy. That's where we come in.
We offer psychiatric and mental health analysis of comic book characters.
So check us out at capesonthecouch.live and across all social media platforms at Capes on the Couch.
Yes, welcome back, Looney listeners. You are listening to Into the Night, the Moon Knight podcast, episode 196. Here we go. We're doing a LUNAR-PICK modern run review, and you are with Tim Stevens, special guest, and myself, Ray. And we've got some feedback here, Tim. So I'm hoping maybe we can, you're the guest. If possible, if you'd like to read them, would you like to do the first and the third one? And I'll go for the second one. All right, so the first
Absolutely.
one...
So,
yep, sorry.
Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, no, sorry. The first one that Tim will read is from our Facebook page. Yep.
This is the Russell Morin here? All right.
Mm-hmm.
So Russell Morin says, coming from the Facebook page, the storyline was notable for being the return of Randall Spector. No longer the Hatchet Man, though. Now taking on the role of the Shadow Knight. Prefer the Hatchet Man, personally.
Yeah, thanks, Russell. Russell is a big villains fan, Tim. So
I respect that.
Yeah, I've got to mention, actually, a little shout-out to his podcast, which has just started, Tomes of Evil, all based on superhero villains. Really cool. But,
wow.
Yeah, so he knows...
I'm a huge villain fan, too. I'll have to check that out.
Ooh, absolutely. Maybe I'll drop you his details. He's always up for a chat. But off this, thank you, Russell, as well. Tim, do you have a preference, Hatchet Man or Shadow Knight?
I'm a sucker for a guy in a costume, so I think Shadow Knight gets the edge there, because Hatchet Man's just kind of a guy with a hatchet, although sometimes he wears a sort of generic mask.
Yeah.
Although Hatchet Man is more of a different character, Shadow Knight's costume is almost exactly the Moon Knight costume.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe Shadow Knight with a bit more flair of his own is where I'm going. I'm not sure.
with some blue optic blasts, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, Hatchet Man, I do like, only because he's like, can I say, like, real world scary? It's
right.
conceivable that someone would be walking around in pajamas and a mask. Shadow Knight as well, as much as I do love his aesthetic and stuff and his character as a whole, for me, I always kind of got them associated them together, Moonshade and Shadow Knight, because they're just kind of like versions of Moon Knight, aren't they? So, as you say, right. Costume's very similar to Moon Knight himself. So thank you, Russell, for those thoughts. Next on Instagram, we have Green Lantern Guy 2814, and he says, I thought Shadowland was a great continuation of Moon Knight's story from the Vengeance run. I wish it could have been more than 3 issues. It probably would have served better if it did, perhaps. It would have been interesting to see more interaction with Khonshu and the Beast. Absolutely. This was a thing that...
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, like Tim, we didn't really touch upon it because it comes later on. We were trying to really be issue-centric, but this idea that Khonshu and the Beast and this Sapphire Crescent was I love this whole kind of intermingling between this because it actually links Moon Knight to the Hand, and I don't know. Yeah, did you? And finally,
Last up, we go back to the Facebook group. Anthony Sitko. I hope I pronounced it right. I apologize in advance, Anthony. Terrible story and even worse artwork. So a little bit of disagreement here, all right? Yeah. They build up the Crescent as the only thing that could defeat the demon inside Matt, and it gets wasted on Randall without any mention whatsoever in the main Shadowland story. I own it because I'm a completist, but this was the worst MK story until Bemis came along. Yes. All right. So I don't think I made a lot of friends with Anthony this episode, but that's all right.
I know, Anthony's great, actually. Anthony's, actually, funnily enough, Tim, you mentioned a therapist. Anthony, I just again wanted to name drop as well. Anthony and his good friend, Dr. Issues, they do a Capes on the Couch where comic books get counseling. Cool. Yeah, so they go through basically psychology of all heroes, villains, and how they're depicted in comics, and they get into the real mental issues. And it was funny that you mentioned in your presentation about Mark or Moon Knight not having really DID. These guys pretty much came to the same conclusion as well.
Very cool.
Yeah. And Anthony's great. He's I call him an Amiga level Moon Knight fan, a loony, because he has everything. He even has Italian versions of the comics. So yeah. But yeah, a very different view here to yours, Tim.
Yep. Yeah. Well, hopefully he can forgive my poor opinions.
No, that's a great thing. Everyone has different. I mean, everyone's taste is different.
Absolutely. Of course.
But yeah. I mean, the one thing as well, worst artwork. Come on, Anthony. I love that. I love this artwork. Anyway, there you go. Loony listeners. So yeah, 3 very different views there. Thank you so much for writing in. You two can still write in your thoughts as well. It's never too late. Always love to chat and discuss with you. Maybe even, if it's easier to talk about it holistically, issues 1, 2, and 3, I'm happy to chat with you as well. So big thank you there. Tim, I think that wraps us up. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. It's been so easy to chat with you, and I really appreciate your knowledge of Moon Knight and Shadowland.
Well, thank you so much. I had a blast. This has been great.
Yeah. Before you go, of course, as well, is there anywhere that these fair loonies can find you if they would like to chat more?
Sure, absolutely. I'm on Twitter at Ungage. That's UNGAJJE. I run the Spool Twitter account as well. That's at the Spool. Not really talking about Moon Knight there, but starting next week at thespool.net, the website, you can find my reactions to Falcon Winter Soldier every Friday afternoon, hopefully, maybe earlier in the day if I can manage it, and my own website, timstevensizungashe.com, which, as Ray referenced, now is hosting a presentation I did at the Far West Pop Culture Association conference, in which I talked about Moon Knight extensively and argued that he, in fact, does not have dissociative identity disorder. So check all that out. And, feel free to drop me a line at any point. I love talking to people, so I'd love to hear from anybody who's interested.
Thank you so much, Tim, and fantastic. I love kind of diving into that whole aspect of Moon Knight and your presentation. It's definitely worth checking out, Loonies, for sure. A little reminder as well, we still have our entries open for our prize giveaway of those beautiful Moon Knight pins from Destructo Disc Design and Media Patrol. So get your entries in before Friday the 26th of March, and we'll announce it on the show on our 200th show in early April as well. So just check our social media forums for the question. It's basically a panel of Moon Knight, and I've asked which issue is that from. So just leave your name and your address and the answer, email it to us, and be in the running. Should be fun. Also, incidentally as well, Patreon members will have also an additional exclusive prize giveaway where you're automatically in the draw for it's like the dark pen, which I think is the most limited edition one. So that's exclusive to Patreon members. Next phase for our 2 episodes, 197, 198, it is going to be a waxing gibbous, so up in the night sky. Next week, there'll be a waxing gibbous, and that means it is our Other Side of the Moon segment. So that is covering an issue of a comic with Moon Knight in it, not his series title. We'll have a special guest, Justin the Owl Osgood, fingers crossed. He's been on the show before, great guy, one of the Patroonies as well. And for our Idle Chat in 197, we're going to be talking about Tigra. So it's going to be fun,
interesting,
fun little joint there. Maybe a past, what do you call it? I wouldn't say a fling. Maybe it is a fling for Mark Spector and the West Coast Avengers. It should be interesting to see what Justin and I come up with there. Also as well, a big shout out to our Patreon page, patreon.com/ITK Moon Knight. Just check it out for all the incentives. You too can be in the running for exclusive prize giveaways and bonus content. Hello Headphones, if you use the code ITK Moon Knight, you'll get 10% off their online store. Go get yourself some new headphones. You deserve it. And also in Dreamland Comics, if you use the code MOON, you'll get 20% their online store. So Tim, when you do make those trips to Chicago, just drop by and get your back issues for 20% off. We're also also affiliate members for Entertainment Earth, all your action figure needs. And finally, we are part of the Collective, so a band of like-minded podcasters, all to do with comic character-based shows. So the likes of The Collected Edition by Paul Matthew Carr, EMP, Earth's Mightiest Podcast, which covers Avengers, Deadpool, and X-Men, or Sons of the Dragon and Immortal Iron Fist podcast, all to do with Danny Rand. Go check it out. They are all fantastic shows. Finally, you can catch us. Drop us a line on email, itkmoonnight@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Discord, Get Vocal, Podchaser as well. And we have a website too with all the stuff. So once again, Tim, a huge thank you so much. You've got the day ahead of you. Hopefully you've just got to pump some coffee into you.
Absolutely. Intravenously.
And with that, fellow loonies, may Khonshu watch over the denizens of the night. Catch you later.
Goodbye, everybody.
Moon Knight and affiliated characters, stories and events are properties of Marvel Characters Incorporated. Materials used and discussed within the podcast are intended for critique and review purposes only under the fair dealing concept of the current Copyright Act. The views, information, or opinions expressed during the podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of the copyright owners.